Greetings and salutations! The showdown between the two Lustrian teams took part at Port Blacksand, the Treetop Terrors' home pitch, newly upgraded. The Terrors themselves having a few issues, being down 2 Sauruses after a brutal match with Mud of the Sun. Thankfully, they have had time to purchase another skink player to the team, which would allow them to at least have one substitute if any of the other skinks got taken out, which is going to be quite likely if they were forced into the front lines. On the other hand, we had the Amazons at nearly 300 team value lower. They were taking full advantage of that with getting a halfling chef and also taking part in extra training. While not as strong as the Lizard Men, with block, dodge and catch on many of their players, they had a very good chance to make a very good running game and passing game. The Huntresses winning the kickoff, they would have to deal with the Saurus defenders, nearly all of them having block now. Though the strength difference between them would make it difficult, they would need at least 3 players to have a good chance to block against a Saurus, which is exactly what the Huntresses coach seemed to have planned. Rather than relying on dodging, they were going to try and take out one of the flanking Sauruses down either side of the pitch and then blitz their way into the skinks. Luck did not seem to be with the Huntresses, however, as they were forced to waste a reroll very early just getting the ball picked up. Thankfully for them, the rest of their round went reasonably well. Nuffle's fickle favour shining on them now, as they managed to take down both Saurus guarding the flanks. Thankfully for the Treetop Terrors though, there was no injuries or stuns here, so this was pretty much acceptable and expected given how much effort the Amazons had put into downing these Saurus. It's unsurprising that they moved their solo players away from the Saurus in front of them, though they didn't try to move past and engage the skinks, which was rather curious. But now it was the Terror's turn to respond, and for the first of many times this match, Pro showed its worth, the Crocs smashing through the barrier in front of it to engage the rest of the Amazons. With Gar pushing one of the few threats up towards the Croxagore, the centre was now wide open for the skinks to swarm towards the ball carrier, the little guys dangerous in large numbers, with the most experienced of them hanging back to act as a sweeper, just in case the Huntresses tried a Hail Mary throw. The Huntresses turn 2 started with their ball carrier, trying their best to avoid just about every skink on the pitch. The Amazons now quickly drawing back a few players that weren't involved in the brawls on the side to try and deal with the incoming skink horde. The Wild Huntresses blitzer easily dispatching one of the skinks down. They would not be getting up for at least a few turns, but Nuffle's thickness knows no bounds, as their player was down by a Saurus as she tried to dodge away. In Terror's turn 2, Pro showed its worth again, saving the Crocs from Bonehead, leading to the injury of Toxis. Not seriously injured, but should be out of the match, something the Terrors definitely needed. The undeterred skinks quickly following up, taking advantage of one of the Treetop Terrors' few rerolls to ensure that the ball carrier went down and was stunned. But the failure to follow up and pick up the ball meant that the Terrors now lost their turn, and it was back to the Huntresses, who promptly followed up, trying to knock back the skinks. A battle for the ball was about to begin. Initially it seemed like it would go well for the Wild Huntresses, but a mutual knockdown ended their turn preemptively, meaning that once again we'd had a very fast turnover. The Terror's turn was no better. The Sauruses on the left failed to do any damage, while those on the right were doing okay, smashing their few remaining foes. But in a problematic moment for the Terrors, they were forced to use their remaining rerolls to just have their skinks push back the Amazons. However, the continual failure to pick up the ball meant that more turnovers were in hand. This led to the non-serious injury of their newest recruit. Pounded by 3 Amazons, there was only one way that was going to go. But what was becoming a theme for this match, their immediate next action resulted in their blitzer being KO'd by one of the Sauruses. With few opponents left on the right, Gar now charged to the left, the Saurus ramming his way in a blitz through the Amazon players. The other Sauruses and skinks trying their best to follow suit, but not quite matching up. The Treetop Terrors eventually changing tactics and trying to engage in a little bit of foul play, with the ref bribe, they had at least one chance to avoid a sending off if it came to it. But even with the +1 assistance and 2d6, they failed to roll 8 or more. Again, the d6 were always the problem with these kind of things. The Wild Huntresses, however, were having none of it, and immediately punished Talan of the Ziggurat by blitzing straight into him, leading to his injury. Not the first one he's had, but thankfully, again, it didn't appear to be serious. Meanwhile, desperate not to be pushed into the crowd, they engaged in some risky blocks that paid off, burning through yet more rerolls. But in the end, it was in vain as the Treetop Terrors expended their blitz to knock the Huntresses' blitzer into the crowd. But even with all the Amazons moved away from the bowl, the Skinks simply could not pick it up, leading to yet another turnover. The Huntresses immediately capitalised on this and got a wild bit of luck once again, not only knocking down Ulder, but knocking him into the ball, which then propelled itself into the hands of one of their catchers. But it was a short-lived success. As soon as the Skinks cleared the way, the Sauruses moved in, leading to yet another injury for the Huntresses, before being quickly followed by a second casualty of the turn, as one of their players was also knocked out. Running out of players on the left now, it was a desperate time for the Huntresses as they now moved to try and get the ball. However, failing a going for it challenge meant that they lost yet another reroll. And that's before we even mentioned being stuck next to a Saurus and all those Skinks ready to pounce. And pounce they did. The ball holder quickly knocked down and the ball set free. The Skinks moving in now and finally being able to get a grip on the ball, passing it between themselves as they moved towards the end zone. But it wasn't quite time for a touchdown yet. The Treetop Terrors determined to try and do a bit more damage to their opposition. But after a disappointingly dull turn 8 for both teams, it was time just to move on with the touchdown and end the first half. The break allowing all of the Huntresses knocked out players to recover and return to the pitch as the second half began. In addition, the Halfling Chef did its job very well, stripping away all of the Treetop Terrors rerolls. Thankfully for the Terrors, it looks like their brilliant coaching once again came into play. Focusing on those assistant coaches has really helped the team throughout this tournament so far, as has the Croxigor's doubles in his upgrades. Yes, block on a Crocs is just not to be underestimated, and it really makes him all that more useful. With the Sauruses covering the Amazons and the rest of the team making a passageway down the right hand side of the pitch, the Treetop Terrors decided to try a bit of star player points farming with a pass, but oh well, you can't do anything about those natural ones, they always strike when you want them the least. On their turn, the Huntresses decided to take up the Saurus' challenge, covering the players with enough tackle zones to ensure they won't be going anywhere before trying to make their way through the small gap in the Treetop Terrors' defences. Followed by a very successful series of blocks. Thankfully for the Terrors, there was no KOs or injuries for now, but if the Huntresses kept rolling like this, they were bound to get some luck in that regard. The Terrors turned 10 starting, Gar went straight for the Amazon Blitz who was harassing the Skinks, taking her straight down. Sadly, stand firm meant that she wasn't going to get any closer to the edge, but the more time she spent on the floor, safer for the Skinks. Not trusting in the Saurus' tackle zone, however, the Croxigor once again had to rely on Pro to ensure it could move somewhere where its lashing tail would be of most use, and playing it a little bit safer this time, the Skinks decided to carry the ball still to the right. In hindsight, maybe running to the left may have been better, but with those 3 Amazons and a single Saurus, there was a good chance they'd knock them down and then simply go after the Skink ball carrier. And speaking of risk, foul play was really something that was not paying off this match. You'd think with all those pluses that the D6 would be kind, but no! It seems that the Terrors were rolling the worst result every time they needed to try and break through the armour. As the Huntresses' turn rolled round, they decided they needed to free up some players, focusing on that lone Saurus on the left. Whilst they had a little bit more backup now, it simply wasn't enough against that many members as you slowly pushed back. The choice to throw in some extra players though felt counterproductive. Perhaps they were planning on knocking out a single Saurus or just downing them and then moving all the players away at once. But as the Sauruses managed to hold on, It seemed like this was going to turn into yet another huge brawl. As the Terror's turn rolled round, the Amazons' positioning suddenly made sense. The large spread of tackle zones meant that the Skinks were going to have a lot of trouble sneaking past, and they would have to make some difficult rolls if they decided to run with it. The Lizardmen then decided to try and free up some room, but bad rolls meant that no one was going anywhere, even with the occasional knockout. And here it was clear that by failing to follow up, that the Saurus was actually now blocking the safest way for the Skink to proceed, something that probably couldn't be fixed this turn and the Amazons would capitalise on very shortly after. The Amazon Blitzer, proving herself the most difficult of opponents, block, dodge and stand firm meant that she would not be moved, and she was becoming a real headache for the Terrors, especially as she downed the ball carrier. The Huntresses adding insult to injury by rolling 5-6-6 on their d6 dice rolls to avoid the various tackle zones and being punched in the face and all the other things the Sauruses could have done. Indeed, it was really showing the differences in the d6 rolls between the two teams. Thankfully for the Terrors, the blocking dice were not as good. Terrors turn 12, they tried their best to get rid of that Blitzer, but everything they threw at her just simply bounced off, which meant that their Skink was going to end up in the crowd. A ridiculous round of blocking later by the Amazons, the Treetop Terrors decided to return the favour, nailing the ball carrier straight away. The Skinks also deciding to put the boot in, and finally getting a KO with some foul play, which meant that Ulda could grab the ball and scurry off safe and sound. After this, the final few turns were pretty quiet, one of the Amazons being injured by the crowd and another one joining her shortly afterwards. Uldar scoring the winning touchdown after the entire Terrors team attempted to stomp one of the players into the ground. And I will say this, that player is lucky as hell. 2d6 plus 4, and yet they couldn't roll above an 8. Well, with this match over, let us take a look at the leaderboards so far. Division 1 dominated by the Treetop Terrors. The Wild Huntresses and Sharp Muggers look like they're going to be kicked out. However, the Green Spoons have lost a lot of team value and also their second tree man, leaving them in a very bad position. If the Sharp Muggers or Wild Huntresses win their next few games, they might be able to swap places with the Green Spoons. Meanwhile, the Hawks have pulled ahead of the Creepy Champions, having won their match against the Chaos Dwarves. The Creepy Champions now in 3rd and Mud of the Sun in 4th, thanks to their loss against Mud of the Sun. Over in Division 2, the Bretonians and Amazons are pretty much in the lead with 4 wins and 2 losses each. Meanwhile, the Norse and Undead, the Jolly Valkyries and the Cold Swarm are dragging each other down, having tied against each other. Over in Division 3, the Bretonians continue to lead the way, the Brave Spears pulling ahead of the Iron Fist and Squig Tricksters. I'm glad to see we've still got some of the unusual teams with the Goblins and the Kislevites Circus. And it looks like the Chaos and the Dwarves will be leaving this particular division if this keeps up. Last but not least, Dames is still in the lead, and I'm absolutely loving it. I feel sorry for the Halflings though. Come on, Saucy Nat, pull back a win or two. I want you to knock out Stone of the Sun or Flint of the Sun. There's too many Lizardmen in this league and we need to cull them a little bit. But that's all for now. Thank you for watching, and I hope you're enjoying this. I'm certainly enjoying playing it. And I'll leave you on this. If orcs are technically mushrooms, would eating them be considered a vegan diet?